7. I guess we can get, looks like most everybody found us here. You may want to shift your chairs this way. This is the best I can do for where they gave us tonight, so I apologize for the inconvenience. But they had to move some event that they were supposed to have tomorrow night, I guess, to tonight, and they needed an auditorium. Otherwise, we'd be in the auditorium. Come on in, sir. Grab a seat wherever you can. And we'll welcome everybody to College Planning Night at Lake Norman High School. My name's Bill Kearney, and I run a local financial advisory company here in Mooresville. And for about the last 10 years or so, I've been doing educational classes around town, either at Mitchell Community College or here for College Planning Nights at the school, for Iredell County, and then also over at the Charles Mack Center. So that's kind of what I do. I'll give you a little bit more on that in just a couple of minutes. But I thought one of the things I should do now, if you guys, did everybody get a packet of information when you came in? If you didn't, raise your hand, or when Natasha comes back in, she'll get you one. If you haven't opened that up yet, if you would take that out, and I just want to tell you what's inside there so you kind of know what we're going to do. The first packet says workshop on the top of it. That's what we're going to go through tonight. And if you don't have something to write with, let me know. There is an activity in there we're going to do. The second packet is something for you guys to take home with you. It's got some articles in there, just some further information, further study on the topic of college. And then you'll see there's a gift certificate behind there as well. Just so you guys know, I consider this kind of part 1 of 2 tonight. I'm going to be talking for about an hour or hour and a half on college planning. And then the second part is if you want to come in and talk a little bit more personally about your situation, I always offer the opportunity to do that. And I don't charge anything to do that. Just come in and spend an hour with me, ask me questions. And so at the end, I'll tell you a little bit more about how that works and what to expect and all of that. Okay? But just so you guys know, tonight I'm not selling anything. I'm just providing you guys with information on the college system as best I can. I will be giving you a lot of information over the next hour and a half. It's going to come pretty quickly at you. There's space in the workshop packet to take notes. We can make this conversational if you need to ask questions, or if I'm giving you too many acronyms or I'm going too fast, just slow me down. I'm happy to do that, but try to give you as much as I can over the next hour. You might be wondering, how does college relate to financial advising? And I can tell you that when I started doing this about 10 years ago, I realized this was an area of information that was completely lacking in our financial world, because college is such an expensive endeavor to go out and do with 1, 2, 3, multiple kids, right? And as I also work with a pre-retirement population and retirement population, and a lot of those people could point back to the changing landscape of college and how it had affected them financially. So I realized if something's not right here, this whole college system isn't quite the way it was when I went through. As I learned more about it, I realized that what you see here at school, what you experience from a guidance standpoint, really can't cover what I'm going to be able to share with you tonight. So, and I don't know any of you personally, but I do know that, first of all, parents, how many of you went to a 4-year college of some sort, on some level? So, I don't know any of you personally, but I do know that probably for the last 15, 20 years, who's willing to admit it was at least 20 years ago? I'll tell you my college was at least 20 years ago. Okay, got a few brave souls. You have put your heads down, you've been working hard, working on your careers and raising a family, and it goes by quick, and now you're sitting in a room and we're talking about college for your kids. Okay? So, what you're going to discover probably tonight, if you haven't looked into this a whole lot, is that this landscape has changed a lot underneath your feet since you were in school, since I was in school. And I'm going to try and share that with you as well. And if you come away with just one thing from tonight, it's that this whole process has become a business relationship that you're entering into with the colleges. And I really believe they have the best marketing campaigns in the history of marketing, because everything they do is geared away from how much it costs, but it costs a whole lot. And so we're going to talk about some ways that you can know about that, attack that, deal with it so that you can act as a smart, intelligent, educated consumer going into the process. That's really the goal coming out of tonight, at least to start. Okay? Background on me, I'll just give you a quick story. I think I'm probably the last generation of kids. I graduated from North Mecklenburg High School in 1997. Are you at Viking? There you go. And back then, so Lake Norman wasn't here, Huff High School, Hopewell, it was totally different around here back then. It was a much simpler time. But when I graduated from North Mech, and really leading up to those years going to college, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. And I didn't decide on school until spring break of my senior year. And I decided to go to the University of Tennessee. I got an athletic scholarship in part to go there as well. And that's really what kind of turned me on all of that. But it didn't pay for everything. And I was a pretty good student too. There was 1,000 kids in my graduating class, and I was number 10. And I'm not telling you that to brag. It's actually a really bad story, because if I had known how much leverage I could have had with the schools, I could have really gotten that out-of-state cost reduced down some. But I didn't ask the right questions. I didn't know what to ask or what to do, and neither did my parents. So I want to make sure you guys know some of those things to do when you go on your college visits and start making decisions down this road as well, so that you can hopefully not repeat some of those same mistakes. And I'll tell you a funny story is I've been doing this for about 10 years. Probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I was teaching a class. My parents had never seen what it is that I do when I do these classes. And so I was giving this speech. My parents were in the room because they just wanted to observe. And I realized about halfway through what was happening. I'm admitting to them that I didn't do this very well, cost them a lot of money. About the end of this point of the story, my dad raises his hand in the back, and I said, "Yes, sir," in the back, and he says, "I'd like my money back." So just so you know, it wasn't the greatest story to tell. It obviously did affect us personally, and I'll tell you a few others related to all this. But some of my personal experiences come out of what we do in our practice as well to help families. Now, in my practice with my company, I am not the person that does all of the student positioning work and career counseling and all that. That's not my area of expertise. I'm a financial person. But I have a team of folks that I've been working with for 10 years now that do all that with our students. And so what I'm going to tell you is the information I have gathered from them and some of the best information from our field on how this whole college process works in here. So hopefully that will benefit you. So what I'll do is I'll kind of start us and just let you know, I have to do the disclaimers at the beginning, of course. This is just an educational event. I'm not giving anybody in the room specific advice, whether it's financial or any other. I always like to joke and say, if you do pick up something from this class and apply it to your situation and it works out really well and you'd like to give me credit for it, I'll be happy to accept that. But otherwise, we never met, okay? So this is just of a general nature. And when we talk about college planning, really college planning breaks into two areas. It's student positioning. This is what's happened. It's turned into something where you have to plan with student positioning and financial positioning. And hopefully from what you see tonight, you'll see there needs to be a good relationship and basically a good marriage between the two. And ultimately, I think most folks in here would like to have a good marriage between the schools that our students are looking to attend and obviously what you pay for them. Okay? Let me just make sure, is everyone in here a parent of or a student in class of 2020? Anyone class of 2019? Okay, one. Now, you're going to hear a lot of what is geared here to class of 2020, but what I tell you doesn't mean that all hope is lost. Okay, there's still plenty of time for class of 2019. But because...
Wait, back up.
Yeah.
No, wrong year. Just
2020. See how fast that went by?
Yeah.
The whole year just went by.
Yeah,
Amazing.
just back up.
Yeah. Yeah. So everyone in here is in the same spot, and you're in the right place, and you might be wondering, well, it's the beginning of junior year. Why, do we have to do this now? And you'll see from our timelines, there's some really good reasons why you might want to consider starting your process right now for college planning, okay? So what we're going to talk about tonight really is a look at the cost of college today, kind of get everybody on the same understanding of what this looks like and how fast it's increasing and all of that. Standardized tests, selecting colleges, all that type of information, what you need to know about student selection, the admissions process, and then we're going to get into the financial part of it. How financial aid works, what the colleges are doing with financial aid now. It's very different than it was 15, 20 years ago. So I'm going to go through all of that as well. If you see anything up here and you want to take a picture of any of the slides, please feel free to do that. You can have any of the information that I've given out tonight here as well. So as far as costs are concerned, I don't know if you saw some of the slides before we started out, but college right now has gone up about 400% in the last 30 years. It's increased 400%. So if anyone feels like, hey, it's been really kind of difficult to keep up with our saving for college, you're probably not alone, because our median incomes have only increased about 147% over that same period of time. So if you break that out, that means college is increasing about 6 to 10% per year. per year, including the years while you're in school. So even while you're there, it continues to increase year over year. Now, to give you an idea, the average cost for public universities right now is right around $25,000 per year. The average for your private schools is around 40, and your elite private schools are around 60,000 a year now. So just take the $25,000 a year. That's like buying your average car every year for 4 years. Now, I would assume everyone here knows it's pretty expensive, but I wanted to give you kind of what that landscape looks like, and then put it into a little bit more perspective. So this right here is a chart that shows you what the cost of tuition was at Yale starting way back in 1970. Okay, so the annual tuition was about $2,500 a year. You could go to Yale, your tuition was about $2,500 a year. So back then, the minimum wage was $1.45, so you could work just under 5 hours a day and you could pay your tuition. Did anybody here have the experience of working while you were in school or working to help pay for school? Well, if you try and apply that now, and this is 4 years ago numbers for Yale, it's now about $46,000 a year. Now, I know the minimum wage has gone up, but it's not going to change what you're going to see here very much. $7.25 an hour is what the average across the nation minimum wage was. So anybody want to take a guess how many hours a day you have to work? You can just tell it's a lot, right? 17 hours now.
When do you go to school?
Pretty good at math. How many hours are there in a day? So we got 7 hours left over after we work 17 hours each day just to break even. So obviously it's become impossible to do this. I also don't think that the cost to educate a student is $43,000 or roughly $43,000 more now than it was back in 1970. So something's happening with these prices that are going up. And what I want you to kind of take away from tonight too is these costs for school are what I would consider sticker prices. It's kind of like buying a car. You see the sticker price and we kind of hope we don't pay the sticker price, and most of us don't if we know how to go through the process of buying a car. It's the same way here. And when you get to college, if you really could ask around, nobody does, but if you could ask around, everyone at school pays different prices. Just like they do for airline tickets and buying a mattress, right? So this is the same thing here. It really comes down to being a good consumer and understanding the process. The other thing you have working against you here is that you can't really kind of learn and make the mistakes and then go back and do it over again and get it right. You have a timeline that you have to follow, and I'm going to lay out what that timeline is. And you kind of have to follow the steps properly and in order and not miss your dates and deadlines, things like that, or it can affect what your ultimate costs are as well. Okay? So we're going to jump into standardized tests. I want to talk just for a few minutes about this. If you're not familiar, has anybody in here taken an SAT or ACT? Maybe PSAT, that type of thing. And you may have gone to the College Board site or ACT. That should be actstudent.org. I meant to correct that. If you go to those websites, you'll get information on when these tests are offered and where and all of that. Now here's what my student positioning team would tell you just from an information standpoint. They would suggest that you take each one of these tests sometime here in the fall of your junior year, both of them. And you don't have to necessarily put in a tremendous amount of time preparing for them. In fact, they would say just go in and take them. We're trying to get a baseline. We're trying to figure out if maybe you test slightly better on one versus the other. Because if you do, then we can figure out which one we want to attack going forward in the springtime of junior year. And maybe get it all the way knocked out before you get to senior year. So right there is your timeline and why it really helps to starting out. You guys have time on your side. Okay? So that would be one thing to consider there. The other thing is they don't offer the tests consecutively every month. They kind of stagger how these are offered. So you want to start to lay out what your roadmap's going to look like for taking the test and get a good idea of how you want to attack that part, because you don't want to get caught with the wrong timeline and then you could have gotten it finished in junior year and now you're bleeding over into senior year trying to finish up taking standardized tests and those types of things. There is a group down in Huntersville called Omega Learning Center. And I'll send this information out to the group afterwards, but Steve Gilbert runs Omega down in Huntersville. And we've known Steve for a long time. I like everything about Steve except he's a Florida Gator. I went to Tennessee, so other than that, he's a great guy. But Steve does diagnostics testing for SAT and ACT every single month. second Saturday, I believe, of each month is when he does it. You go in, you pay a small fee, maybe $25, I think it is. You can take a test, and they will actually do a diagnostics on it and give you a, everything behind the test as to how you did and what you got wrong and all of that. And of course, they're a tutoring service, so they'll tell you about how their services work. But it's a good way to knock out one of these in the fall for pretty inexpensive method. So keep that in mind as well. And then we always get the question in our office, what is the best method to prepare for these tests, for test prep? And I know my team would say, well, the best method is whichever method you use to learn the best. If you are a type of student that learns well reading, then maybe using a book would be your best method. If you need to be in a class with a teacher, then maybe that's the best method. If you want something that combines all of those kind of together, there is a program called ePrep. And you can go to their website, ePrep, and test drive their program. That's been a good one for years. Really intuitive program. Students seem to like it because it gives you video answers when you get things wrong, and really, you can put in the date you're going to take the test, and it will backfill and tell you how much work you have to do each day leading up to it. So that's been a really good program. So we don't really have a favorite, but that's one that seems to come to the top for a lot of students going forward. Okay. So again, just to recap, you can take one of each sometime here in the fall or before the end of 2018. And you can go online, you can get a comparison chart and put your ACT score up, and it will tell you this is what that equals on the SAT and vice versa. So that's how you'll know, hey, I did a lot better comparatively on the ACT because it's got a science section on it. Maybe that's the one you use going forward.
What is the one that is most important that is going to be used to determine?
The colleges will take either one. So you can do either test that you want.
Does that determine what you get, like later in financial aid, is how well you do on one of these tests?
Yeah, you can. It's about one of 72 different factors, but it's a pretty big one in that group. Yep. That's a good question. Yeah, one of the ways that we use to kind of help our kids figure out where they are in comparison to other students is to use the standardized test. It's kind of interesting because colleges are kind of swerving away from using it more, but it's really the only method we have to tell you, or anyone can really tell you, where you stand in comparison to other students across the country, because all our school systems everywhere are different. All our grading scales are different. It's almost impossible to figure that out. So I want to talk about SAT for just a minute, because this is something that seems to confuse folks each year. Are you guys all familiar with how superscoring works for the SAT? Okay, I'll go through this. I got an example. I'll go through it here. So superscoring is a method that the colleges use to compare how you did on different SAT tests, for example. Now, pretty much all the colleges will do superscoring for SAT, but only some of them do it for the ACT, because ACT uses a different composite scoring scale. You can actually Google ACT superscoring, and a list will populate of the schools that do ACT superscoring. So that way, if you're applying to any of those, you'll know whether or not it will make sense to be taking multiple ACT tests for that purpose. But here's how it works. So let's say you go in, you take the SAT for the first time, and you have two sections, math and your reading section. You get a 600 on math, 500 on reading. That is not a trick question, right? 1100. So you're like, okay, that's good. I'm going to go back and work hard on the reading section. I'm going to take this again. I'm going to pull this whole thing up. So you go back, you take it again. You're like, you work so hard on the reading that the math fell back a little bit. So now you've got a 1100, right? But the way the colleges look at it, it's actually a 1200. Because they'll take the 600 from the math and the 600 from the reading on two different tests and put those together and superscore your test. So you actually got a 1200 on this example here. Now, why do the colleges do that? Does anybody know why they might do that? Any thoughts?
Seems fair.
It does seem fair, right? I mean, if you think about it, if you take that over between 3 months, for example, or 4 months difference in time, maybe you didn't feel as good the first time around, right? Maybe the conditions were different. Maybe you forgot a calculator or something, right, that you didn't have before. So it's a way for them to say, what is a true score for this student? The other thing is actually financially related, because there are a number of folks in here who said, I don't really know how super scoring works. But if you go and research the colleges, you'll look and you'll see what their average SAT score is. And so their average score is higher really than what their true average score is, because they're super scoring everybody. Now in this process, if the average score is higher, or if they can show that it's increasing year over year, what do we think in our minds about that school? It's a good school, and it's getting better, and it's getting more competitive. And so if that's what triggers in our mind, then what can they do to their bottom line? It can increase the price. Okay? So that's kind of what happens in this as well. Now there are practical reasons that they do it, obviously, as I said, for multiple tests, different environments. There's also business reasons why they do it. Because I've been doing this about 10 years, and most people are confused about how super scoring, or that it even exists. And I think that's a big consumer point. So that's consumer point number one as far as your business is concerned. It's not that it's not a true score, because everybody's true average score is inflated, if you look at it this way. But it's a good way to attach value to it, at least in our mind. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm going to ask stupid questions probably. But
No stupid
questions. There are no
questions.
stupid questions, I know, but
Nope.
this is going to be one. So is there, for a college, this is the minimum SAT you have to get in, and that's it? You can't even apply if you don't hit the scores, right?
Well, yes and no. What you'll find is if you, I'll show you a slide in a little bit where you'll see this. What you're kind of looking for is what are their breakdowns in what they typically do, right? So what is the average for the top 25% of the people that they accepted last year? What's that average score, right? What's the mean for the student body that they accepted, and what's the bottom 25%? There are things that can make up for a low test score. If you have a really good GPA, that's actually really the driver in this process, okay? So if you have a superior GPA, but you're just not a good test taker, which is a lot of students, that can offset a lower test score, right? And maybe sometimes there are reasons why you don't do well on tests. Those things can offset that. So it's not a showstopper, but in a lot of instances, it can, I think what you're getting at, it can draw a line where they can say, yeah, we're not going to consider you any further. Especially with your large public universities. They're going to have usually a threshold, but then if you can make a case why there are compensating factors behind that, it can push you beyond that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's not like there's a cut and dry answer to that. Okay. All of them are a little bit different. That's a very good question, by the way. By the way, does it kind of feel like you're back in school a little bit here? I'm not going to give you any homework, promise. And I'll try to make it interesting. Okay, so this is incredibly hard to read, so this is why I put this particular slide in your packet. So if you'll turn to page 5. Yes, sir.
How many percentage of schools are using Super School?
I'm sorry, say that again?
How many percentages of schools are using Super School?
Oh, well, on SAT, it's most of them. I'm not going to say all, but it's most. ACT, you'll need to Google that, because they kind of go in and out on who does that. But it's not a whole lot of them. So if everyone's found this, I believe that's page 5 on there. This is a criteria slide, so we're moving beyond the standardized test, unless anyone has any other questions on that, into criteria for selecting colleges. And this is something where I would like you guys to take a couple of minutes, look down the list there at the criteria, and decide what is most important to you. And parents and students can kind of do this together, and you don't have to have the same answers. But just take a couple minutes and read the list down there, and maybe put a little mark by the things that are important to you when you're trying to select or when you're looking for a college as a parent or as a student. Anything jump off the page at you? Financial aid availability, yep, that's a good one. Especially for, and even beyond that, right? How do they conduct their financial aid practices? What do they do with all of that?
Is there still Pell Grants, or, I mean?
There are, yep.
I don't know what all, like federally, still out there.
Yep. We're going to get into that here in about the second half of what we do too, so I'll show you some of that. What else? What else is important to you? Think about it, you're a consumer now, and you're also trying to find a good fit for your son or daughter. Programs, housing.
Cost?
Oh, there you go. I was waiting. So everybody was thinking it, okay? That's okay, everyone was thinking it. Everyone was thinking it. What else? Usually that comes out closer to the front, so.
What they offer in degrees.
Right, course offerings.
Yeah.
Someone want to take a guess at which one my favorite is on the list? I do have a favorite on this. I think they're all good, but I have a favorite.
And where they're located.
Take a guess. Which one's my favorite? It has not been mentioned yet.
Facilities.
Hey, yes, I do like the athletic facilities. That is not my favorite one. Take offense to that. What about this one right here? Anybody see that? It says placement record. What's placement record? Where you go afterwards, right? What percentage of students have a job within 6 months? And which ones, what percentage go on to a higher education or higher degree, graduate degree? Why is that important?
You got the transfer.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what are we doing all this for?
So they don't have a job.
All right, let's back all this up for a second. Think about it, right? So, college is 400% more expensive today than it was 30 years ago. Last year, 72% of kids moved back home after school for some period of time. That usually gets parents' attention. 72%. Now, I have a shameless self-plug. Here's a book I co-authored. If anyone can tell me what the percentage of students who are graduating in 4 years is right now from public universities.
25.
25% right here.
I
25%.
read it on the slide.
There you go. She was paying attention. 25%. So, 25%, that's basically these two families right here. Your kids graduate on time in 4 years. The rest of you are at least 4.5. And only 60% of this group is going to graduate in 6 years. So, what are we getting for our money right now? It's more expensive than it's ever been. It's more competitive than it's ever been. But the graduation rates are lower than they've ever been. And then kids are moving back home. So if I'm a consumer, if I'm sitting in your chair right now and I go walk on a campus and you're going to walk into these wonderful marketing environments, right? And it's going to be great when you go do the tours and the visits. It'll be interesting to see how many of them volunteer what their placement record is. But it should be something that you ask them. It should be one of the first questions that you ask. And you probably want to maybe take a visit to the admissions office and find the admissions officer who's going to be responsible for your name in the alphabet and ask them that question. Because it's pretty hard to find on the internet. Now let me give you an example of how this can work in your favor. Anybody here from Delaware? No? Anybody go to the University of Delaware? I don't know why that elicits smiles from people, but it's not a joke. There is a university in Delaware. Does anybody know what their mascot is? They actually have a graduate who won the Super Bowl, Joe Flacco. They're the Blue Hens. None of that matters. But Delaware actually has a staff of people, probably about 15 or 20, this particular group. And their job is to travel around the country and take the files for their junior and senior class and pitch the junior and senior class to Fortune 500 companies based on their area of degree and specialty that they're going to graduate with. Could you imagine having headhunters essentially go out and find you a job while you're still in school finishing up your degree? It's the only school that I know of that does it, at least public university. I'm sure some of the private schools do that. But now we're not smiling about Delaware. We're going to add them to our list, aren't we? You guys are going to go look that up and see. But they actually have the highest placement record of any school, public university in the country.
What was the name of it?
The University of Delaware.
Oh, I thought you said something
Yep.
else, okay.
University of Delaware. Literally, if you cross the state line, you're going to find it. It's a pretty small state. Okay, so everyone's added Delaware to their list. Yes, ma'am?
Why are only 25% graduating in 4 years?
There's about a million different reasons why you get off track in school. It can be as simple as when you get there, you need classes for your sophomore year that are only offered in fall of sophomore year and you miss it. And so now you have to go all the way around another sequence to get it. Now you're off by a semester, right? Or you can do what I did, which is not go to class your entire first semester because they're not taking attendance. Remember, I graduated 10th, so I'm a know-it-all. I think I'm just going to show up and take the tests, and everything will be great. Long story short, I come home with a 2.2 GPA my first semester home. There's a note on the bottom of the report card that said, your son has a 90% chance we will not invite him back for sophomore year. And oh, by the way, here's the bill for the next semester. I think that was a fun Christmas break. So I got off track in one semester because I now had to retake classes. And I had to pay for those myself. I had to take them in the summertime and change the entire rest of my career. I came back for my redshirt senior year of football, even though I didn't play football. So but I graduated in 4.5 years, so I was in the 75%. So if you're number 10 in your class, wouldn't you assume you're going to get done, you know everything you're supposed to do? You don't. Nobody knows who's going to be in that group. So really, I guess that's kind of a long-winded answer, but there isn't a whole lot of guidance while you're there. So just as important as your plan is getting up to the front door of college, what are you going to do to help your student to get through college? What's the plan you're going to do? And you parents have a lot of wisdom that you can impart to help your kids, so start thinking about that too. All right, so placement record, I think that one's important. Not to dissuade any of the ones that you put on there, I think those are all important too. But I really look at this as a business relationship that you're stepping into, so I kind of think of those things first in my mind. Now, I'll tell you that our positioners, when they do interviews with students, it's very interesting because they gather information on what's important to the student when looking for a school, what's important to the parents. And here's kind of what we've gathered over about 10 years of doing this. What's really neat is that the criteria that students come up with and the criteria their parents come up with is completely the same, right? It's exactly the same, right? Okay, so here's what students say in selecting colleges. This is why they're selecting a school, right? It's a party school, don't tell dad, good sports teams, athletic facilities, right? And many others. So that's kind of what we get. Now that's at the start of the process. The interviews usually happen at the very beginning. So students are fresh into the process. They haven't really thought a whole lot about it. So give them a break on that. Here's what parents say fresh into the process as well. This is what they're thinking. They're concerned about the cost, right? Quality of the education comes into play. I went there. Within a 3-hour drive, and students, don't kid yourself. Mom's going to want to come see you while you're in school. And window sticker. So what happens, maybe this is your house, maybe it isn't, but this is it could be kind of a tough decision. How do you get through this, right? It can be kind of difficult. And I always like to tell people, you know, time obviously goes by really fast. Man, thought when you came in here in your class of 2019 and all of a sudden you're in the class of 2020, right? And I always say when I came here, when I come here to do the class, you know, my kids right now are here, although they're getting bigger year by year, and this time goes by really quickly. And so figuring out what criteria is important to you guys, students and parents, and how you're going to make these things work together is a really important thing to figure out. Because this year is going to go by quickly, very quickly. We're almost to October as it is. Now, maybe this is what you're working towards. And maybe this is what you want, a process of exploring schools and doing your research and all of this. This is where you want it to go. What if your student came to you in summertime going into senior year and said something like this? Mom, Dad, I'm working towards the goal of acceptance by the University of, I would love this, right? Tennessee. Okay? Tennessee is well known for its award-winning faculty. UT is credited for being one of the best universities at which to study engineering, and by the way, they offer one of the best financial aid packages in comparison to their competitors. Now, who in here wants to hear that from your son or daughter? Right? Wouldn't that be great? But if you look at what's going on here, if you break it apart, you can kind of tell that, hey, they've done some research here. I've got a goal. First of all, students, parents love goals. I've got a goal that I'm working toward, and here's why. This school is well known for its faculty, because they're going to help me. They've got really good engineering programs, and maybe I did some career testing, some aptitude testing, and it told me that people like me that are wired like I am typically go into fields like engineering. And I've done research, and I think I fit in really well at this school. And because of that, because I think I fit in well, and academically I fit in really well, I think I might get some financial aid from them to go there. They might actually reduce their costs down to help me get there. That's what we want it to look like, right? That's what we want it to look like as we're going into application season, which, guys, that's this time next year. Our seniors right now are filling out their applications, and we expect them to have those done by the end of October at the latest. So you've got 12 months, and that's where you're going to be. So there's a lot of work to do, right? Okay, that makes sense to everybody? That's kind of where what you're shooting for right there. Something along those lines. All right, I mentioned career assessment. If you're trying to look for where do we start, he's thrown a lot of information at us already. Where do we start? I would suggest some type of career testing, some type of self-assessment. We use a program called Focus 2. It's a proprietary program, but what you're looking for is something that will test your interests, your values, your skills, your personality. And it's going to tell you what people like you typically end up doing, and preferably, if it will give you some backup plans, that would be really nice to know too. Because guess what? Not everybody ends up doing for a career what they major in school or what they start out in. They don't even finish up at school. So this would be the best place to start, some type of career assessment. Is anybody, any Lake Norman kids, are they doing that here this year? Anything like that you know of? Or what school do you go to?
North,
Okay, are they doing anything like that?
they have.
Okay. Yeah, you may have to search online for that type of thing, for some type of career assessment. So here's where we're going with this. These are some questions that you may want to ask when you go on to college. But in addition to the placement record questions, here's some other questions you might want to ask. Now, if you start thinking along the lines of these questions, you'll come up with 10 or 15 others that you're going to want to ask. I'm just giving you some ideas. So let's say you go into that admissions office, or you're talking to somebody that's giving the tour, and you ask them, what criteria for admissions is most important here at this school? Now, what could you do with the answer to that question? Think about it. What could you do with the answer to that question? You're trying to figure out what they're looking for in a student. And if they tell you what they're looking for in a student, what can you do with that information?
Write an essay.
Write an essay. You can feed it back to them on your application. How many of your students graduate on time or in 4 years? Now you can look a lot of this information up, but it would be nice to know how they answer that question. And maybe a follow-up is, what are you going to do to help my student when I send them 4 hours from home to you? How many students don't come back after freshman year? What does your freshman class look like? What types of students are you accepting here? Are you casting a really wide net because you know there's going to be a washout rate and those are the students you want to be left with? What does that first year look like? How many students apply each year to the school and how many are accepted? How selective are you? And then what is your enrollment yield? Enrollment yield is simply, of the students who are selected, how many of them actually enroll here? Those are some good business questions to figure out who this school really is, because you're going to get all the literature and all the information you need on them. Here's the business questions. So think like that, guys, and you'll come up with 10 or 15 more. And again, the goal here is just to become and be a really good consumer of this whole process. Somebody asked earlier about cutoffs for standardized tests. I know this is really hard to see, and you don't necessarily need to see the numbers on here. I'm giving you a screenshot of a program that we use, and it's something that you could even do at home if you want. But this is just a list of schools that a particular student was considering. And if I use my little pointer here, I can show you this column right here shows you what the top 25% score was for each of these schools, meaning this is what their threshold was. This was the top 25% score threshold SAT. Here is your middle, right, mean, your average, and then here's your bottom 25%. So this is this group that we accepted were in the bottom 25% of SAT scores. You'll notice that it's color-coded. I'm just showing you this as an example of a way to organize yourself. Blue and green are telling you that those schools, I'm in the top 25% based on what they took last year. They publish all this information. All right. Blue, the reason that's a different category is that would probably be superior level achievement for you in comparison to what they took last year, and that might be an honors college type school. The yellow and orange might mean you're closer to middle of the pack or bottom 25% based on what they took last year. And the reason that this is important is you're going to need to come up with a final list of schools to apply to. So if you do your career positioning work and you figure out maybe what you might want to do career-wise, then you figure out the schools that have that, then you figure out where you are ranked in that with those schools. Now you're starting to come up with a process that's coming top down. Instead of just building 2 or 3 schools, picking them and applying, you're starting with all the colleges and narrowing that list down based on your criteria. And at the end of the day, you don't want your final list to just have yellow and green, or yellow and orange. Because if you're concerned about cost, these are likely going to be full pay schools. There's not going to be a whole lot of aid, merit aid, from those types of schools. Whereas these schools up here might be a little bit more competitive with their costs. Does that make sense to everyone? I'm going to go into a little bit more about how financial aid and how cost leveraging works in just a minute. But I'm trying to give you an idea of how you sort your schools, not only by their academics, but by what they might do financially.
I know you said you're going to go into this, but I have to ask.
Yeah.
So you go through the process and you apply to the schools and you get accepted to certain ones, right?
Hopefully, right?
Sure. Let's just go with that.
It's kind of the goal.
So then do you go, all right, now what's their financial aid package? And now I apply?
Right.
And can you apply for more than one? I'm just saying, like, best case scenario, awesome, yeah, you get to pick yours. And then you go and apply for these packages?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And that's actually the way our timeline works. Because when you apply to school, I'll just pass these out now. Just thumb through these guys to look at them.
I can just go pass one.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. I think there's 5 or 6, so we may have to share it. Thank you. Your question leads right into where we're going. So the question here, before, just thumb through FAFSA form here, just look at it, kind of get an idea of what's in here, and I'll be talking about that in just a second. So we've gone through the application process, if you will, or we're going to start the application process. We've selected schools, we've done all that. The first thing you want to do here on this part is get organized. If you're going to be applying to 5, 6 schools, you need to make sure you get organized, follow all their requirements, follow their dates and deadlines because they're all a little bit different. Make sure you know what all their requirements look like. Just an example, if it says it's optional, it's not optional. Generally that's a test. If they say do not send in an essay, then do not send in an essay. There are schools that don't want an essay. There are schools that, a lot of the Ivies are not accepting standardized test scores anymore. So just follow their requirements because they are specific about how they do that. And start the process of sending thank you letters. And a good example of this is when you go visit the school, you talk to the admissions officer that's going to look at your file, send them a thank you note from the student, handwritten. Makes a difference because no one does that. Okay? Whoops. I just blew up the there we go. All right. Yeah. So now we're going to do the financial aid part here, which starts this whole process. And the question, a couple of questions before was, how much is out there? What is there? There's about $30 billion that's budgeted in some form or fashion, either from the government or from the schools themselves, to give out every single year. That's a lot, right? It comes in the form of financial aid gifts. It even comes in tax credits and different things like that. But there's 3 types of aid that you really need to focus on. The first type are grants and scholarships. So somebody asked earlier about are there Pell grants? That would fall under grants. Grants are typically need-based. And I'll explain what that means in a minute. And then you've got scholarships, which are typically merit-based. The nice thing about these two is they do not have to be paid back unless there are stipulations behind you receiving them and you have to fill those stipulations. They also don't flow into your income. You don't have to report them as income. So that's nice. There's also something known as federal work study. Many times this is more graduate level, you'll get work study programs. But these are things where you can typically earn money working in the school and it's applied towards your tuition or your living expenses. That also does not have to be paid back. Student loans, they do have to be paid back. Oftentimes, if they come from the school, the rates that you're provided are better than the rates you would get normally. So they are considered financial aid. You can get them in the student's name, and the ones that will come to you from the school or that are offered to you from the school are the ones that will be in the student's name. And the nice thing about that is students can deduct the interest on those when they get out into the working world. That's one reason why they might want to have it in their name. Question? Okay. Let me talk to you a minute about leveraging, because this is what's going to bring in your college lists, all of your academic information into how the costs are figured here. So if you think about this, the colleges basically have everything on their side. We kind of maybe feel that way now, right? They've got great campuses. They've got this whole marketing scheme that they do for you. But they need one thing that only you can provide to them, besides your money. What really makes the machine go?
The student.
The student. And really the student's academic performance. So what the colleges are doing here is they're basically categorizing students in one of two boats. Once we get into the financial part of this, this is how they do it. So you've got students who are in these two separate boats. The students in this boat right here are your students who are, say, in the top 25% of that incoming class. It doesn't mean that those are the only superior students, but based on the schools that they apply to, they're superior. These students over here might be more yellow and orange, if you picture it that way. So what the college is going to do is they're going to accept these two students over here and potentially give them a rebate on their tuition called a scholarship and lower their costs to attract them to come to school, because their academic performance will offset 3 or 4 of these kids over here who will be happy that they got in and their families will full pay. Does that make sense? That's called financial aid leveraging. Now they have all the data on you, so they know how to balance these two boats out. I'm going to give you an example of this. This is from an article called Financial Aid Buying Student Talent. You can go to InsideHigherEd.com. There's a whole bunch of resources there. This is one of the most telling quotes I've ever read. In the article it says, another pool of students may have no financial need, meaning they're not going to receive grant money. We really don't have a reason to give them money. Nonetheless, we want to buy their talent for our university, so we use merit aid. And if you go on in that article, it talks about how they actually use the money to buy the particular student body profile that they desire. So when they get into the business part of this, which is financial aid, they know exactly what they're doing. I want you to know exactly what they're doing too. That's why the whole college list, categorizing, figuring out where you are in comparison to what they typically take. Are you in the top of the class, middle, or bottom based on your academic performance? This is where it comes into play with the schools. Now let me do some frequently asked questions that we hear all the time, because I think financial aid for college is really misunderstood. First of all, true or false, guys? Financial aid is only available for poor families. That's false, right? We just learned that part. My income is too high to qualify for aid. It's not 100% true. Colleges price themselves to leverage, as we just learned, to leverage their available financial aid. Income is one of but many factors. See, this is why it's gone up so quickly. One of the things that we do as consumers is attach the cost of the school to the value of the education, which may or may not be true. But they can take the buffer that they have, the excess, and they can use that to buy the students that they want to attend their school. That's what they're doing. All right? I can't qualify if I own my home, right? Not necessarily. There's a couple of different financial aid forms. This FAFSA form in front of you, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, does not look at your home equity. Does not use that as a factor in determining what your financial aid picture is going to look like. Could you close that door for me? Okay. Depends on where your student applies and if you qualify. So some schools do ask for a different financial aid form, which I'll talk about also in just a moment. And so there are different things. But no, your home does not necessarily have anything to do with it. My students' grades are too low. Well, this is a financial aid form. It doesn't ask anything about academics, interestingly enough. Need-based aid is not dependent on grades. Here's some others. Debt load will help me. Will your debt help you in the financial aid process? Wouldn't that make you look maybe a little bit more needy? Unfortunately not. There's something called visible assets, which are the things that the schools look at through the FAFSA form that can derail this particular approach. So don't go out to Birkdale or wherever and rack up a whole bunch of debt thinking it's going to help you with financial aid. I'm not telling anyone to do that. This is an easy process. I have a 529. Does anybody have a 529? Okay. Just a little warning on the 529. Remember that a 529 only covers tuition and fees. You cannot use it to pay student loans. It also looks like a resource to the colleges, meaning it's kind of like you created a scholarship for your student. And when they see the money come from that scholarship, if they've given you any aid, they have the potential to reduce the aid they give you to make you use your money first. I've even seen where they'll give you an award the first year and then pull it back in years 2, 3, and 4 when they see funds come from the 529. So there are some strategies you would probably want to talk about related to that. It's not too late. There's things you can do, and don't be angry at the person who provided you with the 529. Most of the folks who do that in the financial world have no idea what these do when you get to college. So just keep that in mind there. But here's where it comes down to with financial aid. The families who receive the most financial aid, this is from Princeton Review, are the families who understand how the financial aid system works. I kind of feel like the people who pay the least amount of taxes kind of understand how the tax system works. It's similar. Scholarship winners are not superstars, rather they are the students who have prepared and invested the time to create applications that highlight their strengths. They're making a business case. One more. The best strategy is to impress upon the college scholarship committee members that you have a brilliant future. So here's the super secret formula that is used to determine aid. If you want to take a picture of this, you're certainly welcome to do so. I'll give everyone a minute if you want to do that, no problem. But in reality, it's not a super secret formula. It is this form that you guys have in front of you, which is called FAFSA. You'll notice this one is from 2012, and the one you have in front of you is from this current year, and it hasn't really changed too much. It's changed a little bit. But this form here is called the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. What I will tell you is that most families, at least that we have ever worked with, do not receive federal aid. They receive institutional aid from the schools if they receive aid. But you have to use this form because it is the legal document that the schools can use to ask for all of your financial information to determine what they're going to do. So if anybody has kind of thumbed through this form, what does it remind you of? What was that? Taxes, right? It's kind of like doing your taxes. And it is similar to that. They ask for a lot of the same information. I will say that the one thing about FAFSA and what this ultimately results in is the colleges or the Department of Education calculates what's known as an expected family contribution using the data on this form that you supply. It's called an EFC. Has anybody heard of EFC before? Okay, a few of you have. So this form gets turned in, and you will receive back in the mail something called the Student Aid Report. Now the Student Aid Report will say your EFC, it will literally say this, your EFC is 24,821. It will not have a dollar sign in front of it or a comma after the first 2 digits, or it won't have anything that looks like money. It'll just have numbers. So you'll look at it and say, oh, that's great. They got our information. We're in the system. We're good to go. But that number is actually what the colleges are going to receive, and that's what the colleges are looking at to say, this is what we think you should be able to afford each year for school. And I can tell you in just about 10 years of doing the financial parts of this, I've never had a family agree that that number is correct. And many times it's not correct. Many times it's unnecessarily inflated because of the way information is completed on that form. I'll give you an example. I believe it's question 89 or 90, somewhere in there. Somebody can look and see if I'm right. But it asks you for the sum total of your investable assets or your investments. Now, if I'm not mistaken, and at least it used to be, I've really not studied this form this year too closely, but that used to be under the students section, the section that the student had to complete. So it asks for mom and dad's investable assets on their section. I think that right there is a big misleading red flag, because if I'm a student and I yell downstairs, ask mom and dad, hey, the form wants to know what your investable assets are, so mom and dad are totally up and they just fire a number back, many times what happens is they include things like 401k, an IRA, 403b, or pension, right? Things that are invested. But the form specifically tells you in certain places on there not to include those things. It doesn't tell you where the question is, but it tells you on like page 2, for example, don't do that. So if you make that mistake and you put more assets down than what you really are supposed to, what just happened to that expected family contribution number? Just went up. Now we all said that, we all kind of agree this looks like a tax form, right? I think you're right. The problem is if you make a mistake like that the first year, this form has to be filled out all 4 years, or 5 or 6, that your student's in school. So if you make that mistake the first year and you don't know about it, you're going to make it every single year going forward. Whereas on your taxes, if you have somebody that helps prepare those for you and they make a mistake, you're going to get a letter from the IRS, they're going to fix it, and it's done. Usually, right? So yes, this is like a tax form, but it can also be much more costly from that standpoint. So one of the things that I do with families, just even for coming to this class, and I talked about coming in for, to come meet with me and ask me your questions, which I'll tell you more about that later, is I'll actually calculate what your EFC is. I'll do a professional calculation for you. And I will tell you if it's inflated. I won't know exactly why, but I'll be able to tell you, hey, this is inflated. If you turn this in right now, we'd have to do a little more examining to figure out what's going on here. So just keep that in mind. I think that's something you guys should know, and I like to do that just for a way to say thank you for coming to the class. So that's the FAFSA form. There's also something called the Financial Aid Profile, which looks like the FAFSA form. It's about 10 more pages of information like this that certain colleges, about 400 of them, ask for in addition to FAFSA. They use different ways to formulate that expected family contribution number. I'll just leave it like that. One of the things that happens with profile schools is if there's a discrepancy between your FAFSA form and their profile form, it can delay your financial aid decisions. You kind of go into an audit process, if you will, until they figure out which one is right, and it's not great. So those are the two different forms, and FAFSA can go in October 1st of senior year. So about this time next year, these would be getting ready to be submitted. And so for you guys, class of 2020, they are going to use your 2018, let me think about this for a second. They're going to use your 2018 income information. They just changed this recently, a few years ago. So that's what's going to go down on your forms. Any questions on FAFSA? Sounds like a lot of fun, doesn't it?
And you do
Like a
have
root
that
now.
school pick out before you get?
You're going to have to let the schools, which schools you've applied to, know. So in other words, by October 1st, you're going to know what schools you're applying to.
Yeah.
And you're going to then tell the Department of Education to release this information to those schools. Yep. Now on your applications, you want the colleges to know which other schools you're applying to. Okay? So on each of your college applications, you want to list the other colleges you're applying to. Don't put hearts by the one that you really like or anything like that. Just list them alphabetically because you want them to know who their competitors are in this process. Does that make sense? That's something that people think, wait, we probably don't want them to know who we're applying to. No, you do. You actually do want them to know that.
Can I say something about that?
Sure.
I just got done completing a FAFSA for my son
How
last year.
was that?
That's part of the reason why my hair is white. I'll go ahead and tell you, don't expect to get it done in an hour. It took me a day and a half to get it done. You try to submit it, and if something's not exactly right, you have to go back and try to figure it out. You might need a couple bottles of Valium, some Percocets, and a fifth of liquor just to get through.
Or you can just work with us. We actually fill them out for our
Didn't know
families.
about you, didn't you?
Shameless self-plug, but we do, because they are really good. So we have a process we go through to do all
See,
that.
if you would go a little bit farther north and get out of Mooresville and come traveling to south, it would be so much better.
There you go. They actually moved my office to Mooresville. I live in Huntersville, but I moved up here because the traffic's so bad. Like, I moved my whole company up here. But yeah, no, I've heard the horror stories from people doing it, and it's not fun, and especially if you don't know going into it what it's actually like to do it.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, it's pretty cumbersome for that purpose. So thanks for sorry you had to go through that, but thanks for the information on it. All right, I wanted to tell you guys too, tax form 970, if you Google tax information 970 or tax credits and deductions for college, or consult your CPA for a list of credits and deductions that may be available to you while your kids are in school. I just want to make sure you know about that. I can't really go into it because I'm not a CPA, but you can do that research yourselves and just bring it up to your tax professional when you get down the road, okay? All right, let me put together, you probably want to take a picture of this. This is the one that everybody, this is your timeline. I'm going to kind of put everything together for you. So here we are over here in junior year, and as I mentioned earlier, where you probably want to start is with this career search and aptitude testing. I mean, if I was in your shoes and I was just at the very beginning of this, that's what I would do first. I'd find some way to do that. I would work on the SAT and ACT tests here in the fall and knock a couple of those out, maybe get an idea of which one I might perform better on. Begin my college search. Maybe starts online and then boots on the ground, going to do some college visits. Here's something we haven't talked about. Begin to work on a resume. Anybody in school or parents, you know your students, are they doing a resume in school? There's a particular way you'd want to do a college resume, and I think this is really important for a couple of reasons. This is something you'd want to submit to the college with your application. It's going to give them information that they don't see about you from an essay or from your transcripts. Particular format we recommend also has a professional picture of yourself in the top right corner. And the reason for that is when they're going through your paperwork, we want them to just see this, right? And just see that, hey, this, boom, 2 seconds, it clicks in their mind, this person went above and beyond. No one else today or this whole week has done anything like this. I don't even care if they read it, I just want that to click in their mind. The other thing you can do with the resume is you're going to need letters of recommendation from teachers and community leaders and that type of thing. And they may not know you as well as you think they do. And a resume is a good way to give them that type of information, and then they can write a really, really nice letter for you. So that's something that's, I think, extremely important. And junior year is a good time to do it. Begin the search for scholarships. Now that would be scholarships like that your school would have a list of. Local scholarships, like Lowe's has scholarships, that type of thing. And a lot of these locally go untaken because they don't get enough applications. Your high school guidance counselor can actually help in this particular area because they should have a list of these locally. This is not the institutional aid from the schools, this is local type scholarships. Word of caution on those is you might just want to gauge what you're going to receive in an award versus how much time it's going to take you to apply for it. Right? You can probably figure your way through that pretty easily. Then start your college visits in junior year. That's what your junior year looks like. And it's not on here, but obviously, work hard. Students' job is to get good grades, and if they haven't had great grades up to this point, or this is the year that colleges want to see this. It doesn't have to be perfect in starting out in junior year. It needs to go like this, though. That's what they want to see. Senior year, finish strong academically. That means if you have the opportunity to take a few extra AP classes, do it. Advanced placement. Tougher classes. A lot of times by senior year, kids need 1 or 2 classes to graduate, they're done. So they might take morning classes and be done by 11 and that type of thing. But if you have the ability to show, hey, I went above and beyond, I took a little bit harder courses, even though I didn't need to, And by the way, with AP, as you know, you can a lot of times get some extra college credit and maybe knock out some of your freshman classes. Now, if you have a particular reason in your family where you need to leave, you need to go to work and help the family, whatever, just make sure that the colleges know about that as well. There's nothing wrong with it, just make sure you let them know as part of your application. SAT and ACT again if needed. Refine your college search, maybe you're going to add a couple more or take a few out. I will tell you that ultimately your application part of this, my team would tell you no less than 6 colleges to apply to and no more than 10. That has to do with financial aid. Logically speaking, if you apply to 2 schools, the financial aid officer is going to look at your application and say, we got a 1 in 2 shot of getting this kid. They may not work as hard on that file. Conversely, if you apply to 15 schools, they're going to say the same thing, but in the other direction. We got a 1 in 15 shot of getting this kid. So 6 to 10 is kind of the sweet spot for applications. Maybe you take more visits. It says September through November, but really by the end of October, you need to have your applications in. A lot of times we get questions about early action or early decision applying to schools. Everybody kind of familiar with that or somewhat? So early action, early decision is typically, there's about 6 different ways this can work, but generally speaking, the college will give you a specific set of dates that says if you apply by this date, say November 15th, we'll let you know by December 15th if you're in, but if you're in, it's a binding contract. You have to come to school here. Early action generally follows the same timelines for the most part, but it's not a binding contract. So for a financial aid standpoint, which one do you think is better?
Early action. 'Cause
Early, why?
You're not committed, like you don't have to go there. You don't know how much you're gonna have to pay.
And if you do the binding one, what happens?
You're stuck.
You're stuck. So how hard are they going to work on that financial aid? Probably not as much, right?
Oh, I thought you.
On the binding one?
Yeah.
Because you literally went on the car lot and said, I'll pay anything for this car. How much does it cost? So just keep in mind, read that part of the application and figure out how they do those. I know my team discourages early decision that's binding in nature whenever possible, because it does hamper this process. October is when FAFSA goes in, December is other institutional forms. Now, March and April are when the award letters come back from the colleges. Let me see, let me just show you a picture of what those look like. This is an example, okay? So, when you apply to school, let's say you do by the end of October, you may find out, now the acceptance notices are all over the map, but just let's use this as an example. The school sends you a note in late December that says, congratulations, you're in. We would like to offer you this $10,000 scholarship. That's great, but that's not your financial aid award letter. The financial aid award letters come in March and April of your senior year. It's a very protracted process. And they look something like this. If you can't see this in the back, all that's on here that will distinguish it really is it will say something like financial aid package for the first thing. But it also will say fall semester or winter and spring. And it will divide up the first year by those 2 categories. And it will show you what type of aid you're receiving. Or it will just show you that they're offering a student loan, whatever. So don't get confused. Even though the acceptance letter says scholarship, that's not a financial aid letter. Any ideas on why they would wait so long to send out the award letter? Well, let me ask it this way. How many people in here knew that they sent out award letters March and April timeframe? So think of it this way. If you're thinking about the application process and you're ready to get that letter and you get a scholarship listed on it, you think it's over at that point, right? It's time to go ahead and move forward and put our deposit down and go ahead and commit, right? But they wait a really long time, I think, because people automatically, or there's a group of people who will eliminate themselves from the financial aid process without even knowing it. Because between that December and March time frame, they're going to start sending you notices about sending in your deposit so you can get your housing locked down, right? Your preferred housing. And I think in just about 10 years, I've had one student who didn't get the preferred housing because they waited to get their award letters. You actually have until May 1st to give the school your decision. So what I would tell you is just wait till all the evidence comes in. Put the 6 letters from the 6 schools you applied to on the kitchen table, see what the awards look like. You could actually take that information and you can write an appeal letter to the colleges and appeal for more aid. If you don't think the award is fair, or you're just curious, you can ask them. I really want that to be clear because that is later on in the process and it's kind of a scramble because you're going to be sitting there thinking, oh, it's the end of February, we haven't heard anything from this school, we're not getting anything. Happens every year. It even happens to some of our families and they send in their deposit that's non-refundable and that's the end. And we're like, oh, we've been working on this for 2 years and we try to remember, but it happens every year, people forget. So I don't want you to forget about that. At the end of the day, maybe the award letters come back and there's nothing on them of any consequence. But at least you'll know you've done everything you can at that point and you've let all the evidence come in.
So
Yes, ma'am?
the acceptance letter, it might say a scholarship amount.
Mm-hmm.
What would that example be?
My example I gave is, congratulations, you're in NC State, we'd like to offer you the Park Scholarship, it's $10,000 a year. But that's not the financial aid letter. That's not this.
Will that $10,000?
It would be in addition.
Okay, that's.
Right.
Okay.
Now, a lot of times on the acceptance letter, it's going to say, keep an eye out for your financial aid award letter, but sometimes it doesn't click with people what that means. The other thing is, now what the schools are doing is sending the award letters to the student's email address. They're not mailing them to your house anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So students, when you fill out your Common App and you fill out your FAFSA information, make sure that you're checking your email in March and April, or you let mom and dad check it, or whatever it is you're going to do there, because that's where this is coming. I think that's purposeful, personally. I really do. I think a lot of things are intentionally not really explained. Let's put it that way.
So if you accept the first letter, you will never get this.
You still might, but it may not be what you were expecting. I'm not going to say that you won't get one of these, but you kind of let them know what you're going to do before they let you know what they're going to do.
Just write it out.
Write it out. Let all the information come in. They're not going to let go of your spot until after May 1st. I'm going to give you, I have multiple case studies. I'm just going to give you one tonight that's I think important because this happens all the time and it's a really important point, which is a lot of time, now that you know all this about what they're doing with financial aid and their costs and the sticker price for schools and all that, this is a really good example of why you probably don't necessarily need to eliminate all these really high-priced schools. Now, I'm not saying that your final list of colleges should all be $62,000 a year. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is maybe if one of these schools that you're looking at is a dream school and it happens to be kind of expensive like this, but you fit in really well based on the research you've done, put it on your list. Because something like this might happen. This is a private school. This is the same family or the same student applying to 2 different schools, okay? Here's this family's EFC, it's $15,000 a year. That means when they turn FAFSA in, it calculated that they're expected to be able to afford $15,000 a year for school. If you subtract the difference between these two, that's $47,000. Now, with a lot of private schools, they have what's known as a 100% need formula. So the need in this case is $47,000. And what they're saying is, we're going to come up with a way to help you pay for that $47,000. Now, how badly they want you is how much of the $47,000 is loans, which have to be paid back, and how much of it is actually scholarship, that type of thing. But in this example here, let's say that they offer you a $7,500 loan, and then they give you or gift you $39,500 in aid. That right off the bat's got to tell you, hey, I'm obviously a desirable student to this school. And they know who my competitors are, so they know they've got to bring the cost down. That's why you list them on the application. So, EFC is $15,000, our student loan is $7,500. If I add those two together, it's $22,500 for school. Now, same family, same student applies to our state university, in this case, which might be $33,000 a year, already about half the cost of the private school. EFC again is 15,000. So our difference here, our need is 18,000. But most of your public universities do not have need formulas like your private schools do. What that means is automatically you're going to have to come up with 40% of that $18,000 in need. So you've got a $6,000 loan. They give you $4,800 in aid. You've got $7,200 in addition you've got to come out of pocket with. So between your EFC, your self-help, and your loan, it's $28,200 to go to school at the public university. They just don't have the ability to necessarily do what the private school might be able to do. This happens a lot. So again, the bottom line is don't eliminate the $60,000 a year school just because there's no way you can afford $60,000. Maybe you can afford $60,000, but if they want you as a student, a pretty good chance that you're not going to be paying $60,000. Everybody understand what's going on there? Any questions on that? All right, let me tell you what we learned today. Obviously, the importance of standardized tests and then selecting, kind of coming up with the right list of schools to apply to, what the colleges are looking for, what criteria is important to you, how the financial aid system works. And I know that I'm giving this to you guys like out of a fire hose. It's coming at fast and furious. It's a lot of information. And like I said, I've probably given you about 25 or 30% of what you really need to know, but I just want to get you exposed to all of this. I think the takeaway from this, it's important now more than ever to prepare well in advance for college and to know that you're entering into a business relationship with the school so that you can ask the right questions. And students and families have to be positioned well together. Now, I mentioned that I do a lot of income planning, and that's kind of what our bread and butter is, but in some of the other disciplines that I teach, we have this concept called the retirement income machine. I'm just giving you a picture of what this looks like. For college families, we build in something called the college expense buffer because I really believe that all this stuff eventually ties together. Whether it's now or later, how you plan now is going to affect how you do things later. That class is something that I teach at Mitchell Community College, but I wanted you to know that that's something that we also teach to our college families if they're interested in learning how they're going to work these costs in. So I wanted to give you an example of that. Okay, so this is just telling you that we work with families on all this. Let me tell you what this means, I think, for you guys. I mentioned earlier about coming in if you want to come in to see me. You're obviously not obligated to do that, but I'm offering you the opportunity to come in and ask me your questions. So here's how you would do that. On the back of your workshop kit, the very last page, is a response form. The back of that one, man. The last page on that. Yep. And so what you need to do, if you wouldn't mind, is just put your information on here. We've got your registration, but what I do is I collect these forms before you go. That way, if I'm ever audited, I can prove to the IRS that I conducted this class and I can deduct my expenses for it. So I would appreciate that part of it. But you'll also see on there, hey, I need to talk to you. I'd like to talk to you. Check that box and we will follow up with you and we'll figure out a time to get together. Now, here's what happens when you come in. We're going to spend about 45 minutes to an hour together. You're going to ask me your questions, and I'm going to have a lot of questions for you. And I'm going to go over what our program looks like and how we work and all of that. I can't explain that to you tonight. That's a deal I have with the school because I don't sell anything. But I will tell you how all of that works, and then I will give it to you to take home. And I will not even let you make a decision in my office because I do not want you to feel like you're being pressured to do something. But I do want you to know what the whole process looks like, and then you can decide if it's something you want to go any further with. If you decide not to, that's fine. I always say that if we see each other at Sam's Club, don't hide behind the giant mayonnaise jars. Don't be a stranger. Come up and say hello and let me know how it's all going. I just want you to know what's out there, how this works, and if we can help you, we'd love to. I will also tell you when we're meeting if I don't think I can help you. I don't want to waste your time, and I want you to have the truth. So what I would say is something like, hey, I don't know if there's going to be any financial aid here. I really don't. But we can still help you manage the process, and here's what that would look like. Okay? Or I'll say something like, I think you're doing really well, and I think we could help you, and we can help you maximize what the financial aid thing's going to look like and help you manage this process. That's kind of what you'll hear. Then you get to leave and go home with the information and go from there. It's that simple. My office is literally right down the road, behind the post office on Joe Knox Avenue over there. So that's where I'm located, if you want to come in and see us. So I think that's everything I was going to share with you guys tonight. I know it was a lot over hour and a half. Thank you for listening. Was this beneficial? Are you glad you came?
Yes.
If you have any questions, I'll be here for a while tonight. We have to put our chairs up and all that for the room. But if not, you guys are dismissed. Thank you for coming, and I appreciate it.
May I say something?
Yes, sir.
Like I said a while ago, I just put my son in Wingate College,
Good
or
school.
Wingate University in August, okay? If you get an application from a college, even though it may be out of state, or, oh, it's a private college, I can't afford that, especially if they're asking you to do it and it doesn't cost you anything, fill out the application, okay? A lot of these places charge $100 for you to submit their application. And if you apply to 10 colleges, you just drop $1,000, okay? So if they're wanting you to apply for free and they will send you stuff, sit down and read it. Don't rely on your student to do it. Read it yourself and say, here, do it. He applied to Wingate, East Tennessee, and Western Carolina. Wingate University was the first one to reply back and offer him $24,000 a year scholarship.
Nice.
East Tennessee was $15,000. Western Carolina said, you come up here and talk to us and we'll offer you something. He's going to Wingate. Okay, $39,000 is what it costs for the first year, everything paid for. Over half of it's already paid for.
That's awesome.
A lot of your private universities have got scholarships and stuff that their alumni puts back in or donates back to the school, that they turn right back around and donate it to the students. And so that's why they can bring their stuff down so much more. Smaller class sizes, a little bit better population, so to speak.
And they write their own rules
Yeah.
on how all that works. Yeah, that's a great example. I mean, and Wingate's one it's become very competitive because I think they're trying to reach to another level academically, and so they need those students. They need students like your son to make that happen. They've become pretty popular. If you're not familiar with where they are, it's southeast of here, right down Independence,
Down just
Independence
outside
Boulevard.
the road.
Yep.
What's your thought on going to a community college and then transferring after 2 years?
We get that question almost every class. I would say that's a good question. What we've talked about with financial aid is totally different in that scenario. It's not that that's not a good scenario, but you are now a transfer student. And so the college can't use your academic information from high school any longer, so you don't have the same value to them from that standpoint. I'm using it in their raw language, if you will.
But if 75%, everybody's already dropped out.
That's right. There you go. No, it can work out. You just want to know what your full costs are going to be, what your full sticker costs are going to be for the remaining 2 years. And what we would say is go through a process like what's outlined here, and that can always be a backup plan if you don't like what but you can't do it in the reverse order, right?
Yeah,
Make
for
sense?
sure.
Yeah. Good questions. I just as a word of warning too, guys, and what I find happens a lot is people come to these classes and there will be folks who hear things and then don't come in and talk with us, and then they're scrambling by the time they get to senior year. Don't let that be you. If you've heard anything tonight that's of interest, just come in and get all the rest of the information and then decide what you're going to do with it, because you really can miss an opportunity, I think, to help your family. We've been doing this a long time. This gentleman in the back gave you kind of some information on how that can work out too. The other thing, just last thing I want to say too, when you get things that say apply and we're waiving the application fee, any ideas on why they might do that? It's a business reason. So think of it from a business perspective. If they know exactly how many students they have to accept, because they then know how many students are going to actually enroll, they know this information, right? If they can waive the application fee so they get this many more people to apply, what just happened? They're going to accept the same amount, and they're going to get the same amount to enroll. But now they look so much more selective. And what can they do when they're more selective?
Charge more.
They can charge more. See, it's all related to that. And the information that you get in the mail now, if you've taken an SAT or a PSAT, if you get a letter that says, we'd love to have you apply, you'd be perfect, anything like that, they don't know anything about you. That's all marketing. They know nothing about you at this point. They have no academic information on you other than you took a test. They don't even know what your score was. That's marketing to drive the application. So I'm trying to help you filter out some of the noise in the process. Okay? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So what would you recommend doing about the 529?
Come and see me about that. Yeah, can't really get into that tonight. I don't really know. Sometimes there's nothing that you need to do. Many times that's the case. But sometimes it does make sense to look a little further. Yeah, not a showstopper. Yes, ma'am.
Is the FAFSA per student?
Yes.
I have both.
Yes.
So
Are they going to overlap in school, in college?
I have triplets.
Oh, wow, awesome. So you have just won the lottery. Your EFC gets cut down by 2/3 of what it would have been. Like, in other words, if you had one student going in, and then you have two in at the same time, your EFC gets cut in half, right? So now that EFC gets cut in half again. So it's actually, if you're going to put 3 kids through school, it's really the best way to do it. I'm being serious. Because your EFC...
That's a bit of good news.
Now yeah. You're going to put 3 through, whereas I've got two boys and they're 4 years apart in school. So if I get them through in 4 years, they're never going to overlap, and I'm going to pay as much as I possibly can.
But I do 3 of these, right?
Correct. Yep. They're 3 individual students. You're just going to list that you're going to have 3 full-time students, which will elicit a phone call from probably every school to say, is this right? Because they don't get that a whole lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what you're going to do. So, you know, in other words, if your EFC was 30,000 a year, if you had twins, it'd be 15, just automatically for having 2 kids. And now that you have triplets, it's 7,500. So that changes the whole need formula for you. That's pretty neat. I mean, I'm just saying that the fact that you have to put 3 through, that's the best way to do it from a financial standpoint. It may not seem like it if you're thinking about paying for it, but for what the schools are going to do, they're going to love that.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Good. Anybody else? Thank you guys. Really, I appreciate it. Good questions. And if you wouldn't mind, just drop your form off with Natasha on the way out. Natasha's not only a great helper. Oh, we'll get that. We'll get that. She's also my wife, more importantly. So, so she's got to. We've got to get home and get to the boys too. So, thank you all very much. If y'all think of anything or any other questions, just email me or give me a call. I'll be happy to answer it.